When we talk about meaning in life, it is a metaphor. It means that our actions are oriented towards some greater purpose, like the words in a sentence are arranged to point to some higher understanding. We are meaning-making creatures, and we make sense of the world around us by assigning it meaning. How one finds meaning in life is often dependent on the prevalent worldview in which they live. Most of the dominant worldviews which have shaped our modern world had their origin between the period of 800 to 300 BC, known as the Axial Revolution. It is called the Axial Age because it came with a radical turning point in how humanity viewed its role in the cosmos, taking place in 4 main locations: Israel, Greece, India, and China. From 1200 to 1150 BC, they experienced the greatest collapse of civilization the world has ever seen, much greater than the fall of Rome. Within 50 years, more cities, political organizations, and ways of life go out of existence than any time in world history. The Hittite, Egyptian, Canaan, and Mycenaean Greek civilizations all faced widespread destruction. From roughly 1150 to 800, the world enters a dark age. Huge amounts of literacy are lost, trade breaks down, and there is enormous economic decline. This collapse was due to many converging factors, but the result was clear. A violent, sudden, and culturally disruptive transition which shook the pre-existing worldview to its very core. A worldview we are going to refer to as the continuous cosmos. It was based on a belief that any difference between the natural, human, and sacred worlds is only a difference in degree. The gods acted in very human ways, but simply possessed more power. The chaos and violence you see in the world is just a part of that world. There is no difference between the violence of nature, the violence of humans, and the violence of the gods. Secondly, there was a belief that everything was cyclical like the days and the seasons. You do not want to alter the world too drastically because it would inevitably come back to affect you. Wisdom in this old worldview meant the knowledge that was needed to gain the most power and prosperity. It was important to become as embedded in the world as you possibly can. This was a powerful way to orient yourself, and it built and sustained many of the great civilizations of the past. What happened as these old kingdoms passed away? Small states began to emerge. There is more experimentation with social and cultural organization. New psychotechnologies are invented which have an enormous impact on our cognition. If a physical technology is designed to fit the way the human body operates, to expand our physical capabilities, a psychotechnology is designed to fit and enhance the capabilities of the mind. The greatest of these psychotechnologies was the emergence of alphabetic literacy. Old forms of literacy were very difficult to learn, often with thousands of symbols standing for complex ideas. It is likely that less than 1% of the population was literate, as it was confined to a very small ruling elite. With symbols now standing for basic phonemes, alphabetic literacy becomes much more accessible, and it was during this period that literacy was spread to a much greater percentage of the population. As a technology, literacy was able to stretch our cognition across much greater spans of time. Suddenly, I could take my thoughts now, my thoughts from a week and a month ago, and apply them all to the same problem. This allowed for the emergence of second-order thinking, that is, a knowledge and awareness of our own cognition. As we began to empower and enrich the mind, suddenly we become much more self-critical and self-aware. This rise in our capabilities for self-examination came hand in hand with the rise in our ability for self-deception. Our mind and our perception acts as a lens through which we see the world. An increased ability for self-critical cognition comes with an increased ability to distort reality. The mind can twist itself out of alignment, misinterpreting and misperceiving the world around us. I wear glasses which allow me to see the world much more clearly. If the lens gets smudged, it can distort my vision. So what can I do when this happens? I can take a step back and look at the glasses. I can examine the medium of sight itself. I can determine what patterns or properties are distorting my perception in order to fix them. With the emergence of second-order thinking and the ability to reflect on our own cognition, we can fix and transform the mind to see the world more clearly. With this mode of thinking, a new dominant worldview emerges. We move from a view of reality as a continuous cosmos, which is cyclical and only varies in degree, to 2 completely separate worlds. There is an everyday world, beset by self-deception, violence, and suffering. A world in which we constantly act against our individual and collective self-interest. A world filled with frustration, futility, and despair. And there is a real world. A world free from self-deception, free from the suffering and violence that we cause. A world in which we do not act in a self-destructive manner and we can flourish into fully realized human beings. With this transition in worldview comes a change in the way we think of wisdom. It is no longer to gain power and prestige in this world. Wisdom is now seen as the ability to transcend this illusory world and awaken to the world that is real. We capture this idea in the metaphors we use for transcendence. Metaphors of enlightenment, waking up, growing up, being born again, being woke AF as the kids are calling it now, are all pointing towards moving from this world of illusion to the world of reality. The prevalence of this idea of waking up in pop culture points to how much this worldview still affects us to this day. Remember that in this old view of reality, you did not want to affect the world too drastically, or it would inevitably come back around to affect you. With this one shift in thinking, we suddenly awaken to the fact that the future is wide open, and that our actions and moral choices have a direct influence on how the cosmos unfolds. What connects you right now to the 7-year-old version of yourself? Every cell has died and been replaced, so your body is not the same. But we tell a story that runs like a thread into our past and connects us to who we are now. Narrative. The idea of a beginning, a middle, and an end, where some central problem is presented and then solved through the actions of the protagonist, is deeply rooted in who we are. We simplify narrative down to its most easily graspable form, so we can practice it over and over again. We ask each other, how was your day? Tell me about yourself. We want to hear each other's stories. We orient ourselves in the world by understanding where we fit within the larger narratives and meta-narratives that we hear and tell each other. These stories constitute what is real and significant. In the pre-axial age, their sense of time was fragmented. There were stories here and there, but no overarching story for why time is unfolding in the way it is. The idea of time unfolding in a narrative fashion has its origin, once again, in the axial revolution, in perhaps the most unlikely of places. There is a beginning in which humanity is cast out from paradise, from this real world, free from suffering and self-deception. Then, a story unfolds of how this conflict is resolved, and how humanity can reclaim its standing and return to the paradise that was lost. Unlike many gods of the past, the God of the Hebrews is not tied to any specific location, but instead, he seems to be a god of history. He moves through time and space to deliver the Israelites from slavery in Egypt into a promised land of milk and honey. The fact that Egypt was chosen is deeply symbolic, as it represents the epitome of the pre-axial world. Instead of a belief in a cyclical cosmos, the belief emerges that the future can be radically different from the past, and that our choices can bring about a better future. Suddenly, our human actions take on a cosmic significance. Through our own moral action, we can steer the universe towards a better or worse ending. We can move from this land of self-deception and self-destruction into a world free from the pain and suffering that we inflict on ourselves and each other. Their faith in bringing this better world to fruition was not faith as it is thought of now, that is, believing something without evidence. Instead, it was a sense of timing and how things were turning. It was paying attention to the course of history and observing how history was repeating itself. To live in the right way, the way in which we are the least susceptible to self-deceptive and self-destructive behavior, means developing a sensitivity, an understanding of these pivotal moments, these turning points in history in which things can radically change for better or worse. This idea took hold in the world of ancient Greece, although in a very different form, and together these ideas merged and formed the pillars of Western thought for thousands of years after. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you stick around for future videos because I love making them and I love sharing these ideas. A lot of work and research goes into each video, and if you like the channel and want to support us, there are a few ways you can do that. If you want a free audiobook from Audible, we get a commission for each sign-up. If you are already planning on buying something from Amazon, using our banner does help us out a lot. Or we just launched our Patreon page where you can get all kinds of rewards for supporting us directly. Either way, I truly appreciate the support, and I will see you guys next time.